is holding its national convention this weekend in Anaheim, California. Next, a speech from Friday by Reginald Jones on minority issues. Our program begins after an introduction by Stephen Dasbach, the Libertarian Party's national director. It's about 20 minutes.
That was a humble entrance, wasn't it? Good afternoon to all the libertarians. Is it still morning? Afternoon, as far as I'm concerned. I'm still on New York time. I am honored to be here today to speak to you, especially during this election year, because we have heard from the two large political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, who are doing their best to win the black vote. The Democrats usually get 80, 90% of that, and the Republicans are trying their best to break that barrier. And those of you who have seen the debates between the Vice President and Senator Bradley during the Democratic primary process, remember the Apollo Theater debates, when Gore and Bradley were trying to out-black each other. And it's fascinating how wherever they approach the black vote, be it at the churches, the NAACP convention, Urban League convention, the Democrats are always sure to stress the victimhood, the supposed victimhood of black people, how downtrodden we are. That's the best way to approach the black vote in America. Talk about downtroddenness and oppression. And remembering, as Gore said, as a young man in Tennessee, where they have the monument to the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Forrest, where in Tennessee, his father showed him the plight of black people and taught him how to be sensitive to their plight. And of course, on the Republican side, there's Governor George W. Bush, who talked about a hope gap in the black community. Did you see that? Speaking to the Congress of Racial Equality, he's talking about there's a hope gap, a gap of hope in the black community. Everybody talks about the black community as if they know us so well, as people who cannot possibly take care of themselves. And everyone has a government solution. There's affirmative action, of course. There's job training centers. There's one welfare program after another, summer jobs, you name it. There are all these government solutions. We, as libertarians, have the moral high ground when it comes to approaching the black community, because we have the one message that really pertains to the black community, is a message of freedom. It's the one thing it is the one crucial thing that is left out of the equation in the presidential debates. You know, I used to picture myself debating, and it won't happen, so don't worry. I used to picture myself debating Gore and Bush, and they're both banning about, what's the best thing, that we're going to have, free computers for the black community, or free this or free that. Everything is free. And no one talks about the most moral system known in the history of mankind that has actually been the boon and the benefit of black man in America, and that is capitalism. As Ayn Rand said in Conservatism and Obituary, in her book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, that the problems with the Democrats is they will not admit that what they're really for, what they're really advocating, is fascism. And what the Republicans' problem is that they will actually try to trick you into your own freedom. They will not stand forthrightly and say, we stand in defense of capitalism. Now, some people might be wondering, well, capitalism has never taken hold in the black community. Let me discuss with you a phenomenon you might have heard about. Anybody ever heard of hip-hop? Right now, a multi-billion-dollar industry hip-hop is. And when I say hip-hop, it means rap, the music. It means the fashions. It means the b-boys, the break dancers that made up the part of the art of hip-hop. It means the fashion businesses that have sprung up out of hip-hop. FUBU, anybody heard of FUBU? 4 young men, 4 young black men in Queens. They didn't ask Jesse Jackson to go to Capitol Hill and ask for a business loan. They started a company called FUBU, For Us, By Us, following in the tradition of Booker T. Washington and Elijah Muhammad. Carl Kanai with Kanai Fashions. Russell Simmons, who started Def Jam Records, who gave us Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, with Fat Farm Fashions. The RZA, the leader of the Wu-Tang Clan, with Wu Wear. I can go on and on and on. None of these businesses were started because of government intervention, but in spite of it. In my native land of New York's, of Bronx, the city of the Bronx, in the nation of New York, in the Union of the United States, free markets are not really very popular. In fact, where black people try to enter into the free market, the government stands in the way. Be it livery cab service. Remember Danny Glover going to New York to dramatize the plight of black men catching cabs in New York? And what he should have done was gone up to the Bronx, for instance, and talk to the West Indians, who started what they called gypsy cab services, competing with the city-owned monopoly. And yet, were confronted by the city-owned monopoly to cease and desist their free market activities. There was one activity they could not stop, and that was the birth of hip-hop. And let me take you back to the beginning days. How did all of this start? People are always fascinated how this got started. Let me give you a couple of names, Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash, as well as Kool Herc. Grandmaster Flash was a DJ back in those days. His name, everybody knew him pretty much as Joseph Sadler. And he was one of the best DJs in New York. He always came to the party with his 2 turntables and realized that a very ingenious invention. By putting the needle in the middle of the phaser, when it was in the middle, the turntables were off. To the right is the right turntable, to the left is the left turntable, as far as the audience could hear. And what DJs started doing back then is they used to do what they call break beats, because the break dancers would hit the floor and break off. They can be dancing with a young lady. Break off from the young lady and battle each other on the dance floor to see who was the best dancer. So what they started doing was what we call break beats. For instance, James Brown's Funky President. They would spin a certain part of the record on 2 turntables. On the right turntable, once the first 8 bars ran out, switch to the left turntable, it was already moving. Back and forth, back and forth. And this became very popular. Flash had a dilemma, however. People were paying too much attention to the DJ and not enough attention to the music or to the party itself. So he enlisted the help of a friend, the late Keith Wiggins, to be his MC, to rap on the mic, talk to the crowd, get them interested, kind of that call of response like you see in the black churches, and the preacher could say, it's Sunday morning, and everybody will, yeah, amen. Same thing. Keith Wiggins became known as MC Cowboy, later became known as Grandmaster Flash and MC Cowboy. And this is how hip-hop was born. We used to play at the community centers and block parties. But this is before we even moved downtown to places like Harlem World. We also used to do something very ingenious. We used to go into the abandoned buildings in places like Jackson Avenue in the South Bronx, burned out abandoned buildings, government-owned buildings, and where there's no electricity and no running water. Go into the lobby of the first floor, the vestibule of the building. We get the graffiti artists to design a stage set. Like you see here, graffiti artists would design a mural on the wall. The New York City skyline, the name of the group, say Grand Wizard Theodore and Fantastic Five on top. Below that, the number 5 train, which was the train that was running on that line at the time, and the train L, and some beautiful colors and murals of people and different names, as well as the graffiti artist name. That's the stage set. Of course, you're going to have a party, you need electricity. So what they would do is run an extension cord somehow, and to this day I haven't figured out how it was done. Run an extension cord into a light post at the end of a corner, a street corner. Run the extension cord into the building, plug in the equipment, as well as light, just light bulbs hanging down from broken light fixtures, hanging down, and we had light. Now you need security. What to do? Africa Bambaataa started something called the Zulu Nation, which would regulate disputes between gangs and such. There's your security. All cash businesses now. The government hadn't caught up with them yet. No government regulation. No affirmative action. That was a mistake that came later. Remember Vanilla Ice? That always gets the biggest laugh. Sorry about that, Ice. And you needed, in order for people to know who you are, you had to make tapes of the parties, of different rhymes. Like you have the Funky 4+1 or the Fearless 4 or the Cold Crush Brothers. Everybody wanted a tape of the party. So you had to go to somebody who had the dual cassette decks, and you had to know what was playing. And the way you would hear about it was the boombox, which was also created in the South Bronx. What they would do, and some of them use it to build their own DJ equipment, would go to a junkyard where cars were discarded cars, take out the car speakers, get discarded furniture, rebuild it, place the speakers and rewire the stereo system. Then you had the boombox. That was our CNN. That was our advertising. There was no rap on radio in those early days. And you have a tape of Grandmaster Flash versus DJ Breakout. And you could walk in any South Bronx street someday and see the battles emerge between the Cold Crush Brothers and the Fantastic Five. You can be on 3rd Avenue, 149th Street, and you see them meet in the middle of the street. And crowds would gather around, and somebody would yell, "Fantastic!" And Kevy Kev from Fantastic Five would start the rhyming battle. Then somebody would yell, "Cold Crush!" And Grandmaster Caz, who actually coined the phrase hip-hop, Grandmaster Caz would respond, and back and forth and back and forth. And whoever won, be it Fantastic Five or the Cold Crush Brothers, were declared the winner, and no one filed an antitrust lawsuit against the winner of the contest. As with anything in the free market, however, rap began to grow, and it started to have an effect on the residual economies. Run DMC is a perfect example of that. They did a song called My Adidas about sneakers. They were never paid by Adidas for this. I never understood why, but they did the song on their own. It was their favorite sneakers. Sales of Adidas sneakers went up just as a result of Run DMC doing that song. It was also one of the first instances of real entrepreneurism as far as becoming a business owner. Russell Simmons, who started Rush Communications, was the president and CEO of Def Jam Records, which, as I said, brought us Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, and Russell Simmons. Rap began to grow in prestige. In fact, at that time, 2020 did a story about rap music, this ghetto phenomenon that would soon pass from the scene, like the fad, like the pep rock or the yo-yo. And I remember black leadership at that time saying this pathology in our inner cities, which they started calling at the time was a ghetto when I grew up in it, shows why we need more affirmative action and more government intervention, when in fact what we were doing was practicing the free market. Even though most of the young men would condemn capitalism, it's exactly what they were doing. The black consciousness movement of the 80s, which brought more young blacks into politics. It used to be just a white man's game, they used to say. Because of Public Enemy, because of Boogie Down Productions, because of X-Clan, more young black people started to become civic-minded. It was because of Boogie Down Productions and KRS-One that there was even a movie about Malcolm X. KRS-One used to feature pictures of Malcolm in his videos. And all of a sudden, you saw Malcolm X hats springing up all over the city. And most people didn't even know who Malcolm X was before that. In 1990, I met a young man by the name of Sean Puffy Combs. Anybody know who Puff Daddy is? He was an intern at a record company, Uptown Records, started by a former rapper, Dr. Jekyll, from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Andre Harrell is his real name. And working for free, a dropout from Howard University. A lot of people would say at that time that this young man, Sean, would never amount to anything. He dropped out of high school. He's got an attitude problem. He really thinks too much of himself. Well, he ought to have thought much of himself. He began to make remixes from some of the artists on the Uptown label. Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, Heavy D and the Boys, and others. He had quite a track record. He had an unfortunate falling out with the people at Uptown Records, and he was let go. Clive Davis of Arista Records, the man who's brought us Whitney Houston, artists such as that, saw the handwriting on the wall that rap music was the biggest boon to the record industry. It was cheaper to produce, The videos were cheap to produce, but the profit margin was astronomical. So, this is what he did. He decided to talk to Puff Daddy and say, I will give you $1 million to start your own record company. We will distribute. And you will have your own record company to sign whatever artist you please, and in 5 years you will own all the masters. It will be a standalone company. Puff Daddy started Bad Boy on $1 million. Just 3 or 4 years later, he was worth $250 million. As John Stossel said, greed is good. Because Clive Davis was not doing this out of some gesture towards the civil rights community. It was a business decision to outclass his competitors. A young man by the name of Percy Miller in the New Orleans projects, one of the worst neighborhoods in the United States, just a few years ago was selling tapes and records out of the trunk of his car, is today worth $361 million. He not only owns his own record company, he owns his own movie studio, clothing line, toy company, sports representation company. Need I go further? So there's no hope gap in the black community. There's no opportunity gap in the black community. There is a freedom gap. And we need freedom, first of all, from government intervention that keeps us from entering into the free market, such as the Davis-Bacon Act and other such racist union laws which are promoted and upheld by black legislators. We need freedom from that same black leadership who kowtowed to such people such as Fidel Castro and Decree 217, which discriminates against blacks and mulattoes in Cuba. But most importantly of all, and this is where you have the absolute lock, stock, and barrel, high moral ground standing, an end to the war on drugs. You see, while the black community is one of the most conservative communities in the country, and we have been devastated by the welfare state, the absentees of the fathers in the home, I know this as a single father. The fathers being pushed out of the home by government destroying black children in their schools, where the teachers themselves don't send their students. If you don't believe me, ask Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, who wrote the book, The Conspiracy, which is what it is, to destroy black boys. A government-dominated system that purposely destroys these children. The government war on drugs, however you may want to call it, is racist at its core, and I will tell you why. The black community does less drugs than any community in the country, yet our neighborhoods and our communities are ground zero. We are the POWs in this so-called war on drugs. Now, you better call your friends and neighbors because they want to hear this a little bit. I want to tell you a little story written by the president of Chocolate City, George Clinton. You ever heard of him? It's about a story he wrote about sort of a mascot for the war on drugs. And it's a story about a dope dog. U.S. Custom Coast Guard dope dog, nicknamed Bustum. Like most dope-sniffing dogs, he's got a habit. Trained to have the habit. He picks up the tracks of the traffickers and tracks them like a rabbit up the coastline. K9 controls substance retriever, receiver of the Golden Nose Award, for leading them to the cash, cashing in on the stash. Now he's in line for his issue of the booty. Never does he do a line in the line of duty. He's a dope dog. U.S. Custom Coast Guard dope dog, keen sense of smell, tracking the telltale tales of cartels, dope boats, big dope, never a gram of OZ kilo too low key. Gotta be tons of P-blow, bales of lumbo. While other dogs sniff one another's tail, he can track the trails of a dope sale straight to the stank account. Big bank. He can track the profits of a dope sale to the stank account, big banks. Banking on laundering the dirty money, it's not the drugs that drag you through the mud, it's the money, and it ain't funny. Old Mac Uncle scored some drugs, CIAIO. And with those drugs, he bought some arms, CIAIO. There was a bang bang here and a snort snort there. Here a bang, there a snort, bang and snorts everywhere. Old Mac Uncle starts a war. BCCI, DEA, CIAIO. But the war on drugs is hell on a dope dog. He can tell when the nose goes when the door is closed, and the dealer wants to hide the dope in the booty or in the crotch. And they squat and make the dope dog sniff the bowels, foul as they pass in his face. Damn. For a stinking half gram, U.S. Custom Coast Guard dope dog, an undercover narc with a bark. He took a bite out of crime. Posing as a CNI dog, he bit the blind, the man with the cane made of coke. Now, as you stop and you might find faces in prime time, faces of yours and mine. Now, an unrelated overdose, an unrelated over-the-counter overdose becomes drug-related. And yet, as soon as the dope boats float, the media goes comatose, aided and abetted by a lot of apprehension and indifference. The bigger the headache, the bigger the pill. Y'all better take your medicine now, because you're going to be ill when I tell you the deal on dope. There is more profit in pretending to stop it than selling it.
Here's what's ahead on C-SPAN. Next, a speech by former Reform Party Chairman Jack Gargan at yesterday's Libertarian